Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back to Paris History at Avec, a Hemingway, and today we're talking about Saint-Georges. I have no idea where this is. I know it's in Paris, but maybe I have visited. But Claudine's going to teach us all right now. So thanks, Claudine. I'll let you take it from here.
You do. It's actually very close to where you live.
It's in the 9th by the oldest library.
Exactly. So Saint-Georges is a little part of the 9th. It's just kind of right below Pigalle and below Montmartre, but it is a really fascinating little area. And if you are like me and you love the artists, especially of a certain period of Paris, this is where a bunch of them kind of congregated, including one of my favorite that I try to work into every single episode, which I don't think we did in the last couple. So I even wrote down my 6 degrees of Delacroix.
Yeah, we definitely have to keep that going.
Yeah. So in that area, one thing that people might go and see, and they definitely should go to see, is the Musée de la Vie de Romantique, and it is a adorable little tiny museum. It is formerly where Ari Scheffer, who was a Dutch artist, lived, and then they ended up turning it into a museum. In 1820, it was built for another gentleman named Wormser, but in 1830, Ari had moved into there. He moved into the house, which is small, which has an adorable little garden. And then he had 2 other buildings created. One of them was a workshop where he ended up actually training artists there, and especially a lot of women artists, because that was really difficult, as we've talked about before, for women artists to actually, they couldn't go to ateliers. They couldn't go and sketch nude male models. And so Ari basically took it upon himself to kind of be the one that trained a lot of these artists. And this was during the Romantic period.
I love that he's helping the ladies out.
He's helping the ladies. He moved to Paris in 1811. His mother was also an artist. And the very next year, he ended up having his very first painting in the Salon of 1812. He was, as I said, a master of the Romantic period. And every Friday where he would hold a salon. And his neighbors would come there, including Delacroix, Chopin, Georges Sand, Balzac, Victor Hugo, basically all of the greats of the period, the artists and the authors. During the spring, the courtyard was basically just covered with wisteria, which you could still see today. And these artists, like, I could just go there and you just imagine, I mean, I'd give anything to be able to go back there and be like, oh, I'm just going to sit here and listen to Victor Hugo talk to Delacroix.
Could be a fly on the wall.
I know, but back then, they were just, Eugene and Victor. They didn't really care. But Schaeffer died in 1858. And his daughter, Cornelia, purchased the home. He had just rented it. He didn't own it. So she purchased the home after his death. And then his niece took over later, and it was sold to the state in 1956. In 1982, the city of Paris took it over and annexed the Carnavalet, so it was actually just an offshoot of the Musée de Carnavalet, and it was known as the Ron Schaeffer Museum. But in 1987, it changed over, so now it is the Musée de la Vie de Romantique, and it is also dedicated to his friend Georges Sand. So when you go into the little house, I know you've been into the courtyard, but have you been into the little house?
Yeah, it's super small and the top level's always under work.
Yeah, it always is. And it's like, I love going in there because I love those places where the floor really creaks, when you step on it. And it has this very small little kind of winding staircase. And there is like a little sculpture of George Sand's hand. And like that just it's a really quaint little lovely museum. They do some really cool exhibits that they change out like twice a year, and those are usually a cost, but usually for the actual museum itself, it's free. But if there's a special exhibit, you do have to pay for that. It's open Tuesday through Sunday from 10 to 6, but it's definitely something you should go and check out in that area when you are there.
And I like the little cafe in the greenhouse.
Yeah, it's really, really cute. We tried start a live walk from there one day, and Kate got screamed at for trying to like be there filming something.
Wow. Uh-oh.
I know. So it was just in the courtyard too. It wasn't like inside. But it is really pretty, especially on a spring day or a fall day. Just to go there. It's a really lovely little place to sit and check out the museum. And it's offset off the road. So when you go out down the street, you kind of go down a long alleyway that's kind of covered with trees and flowers to go over there, which is it's really kind of cool to go see.
It's very cute. You should definitely go.
Yeah, it's definitely at number 17 on the street is where a woman named Nina de Villard du Calais lived. She was a model for Manet. She held a very, very popular salon at the time. And she, if you go to the Orsay, there is a painting and it's called Lady with a Fan. And that is her. And I'll put a picture of that on the website. But I love that painting because I love Manet. But it's one time I was like, wait, who is this woman doing what I usually do? Going down a rabbit hole every other direction. And then I was like, wait a minute, she lived right, like basically when you walk out of the museum, the building straight ahead is where she lived, and she would held this salon that everybody that was anybody at that time would come to. I think we need to bring the salons back. I think those.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I think it'd be, you get all
I
the
think we should.
fancy
I was thinking
smart
about that
people
the other
you get
day.
to
We
hang
should
out
do
with.
it.
Also on that street on Rue Chaptal, at number 11 is where Serge Gainsbourg lived as a child, the famous French singer. And at number 10 was once the Society and Authors and Composers organization. And if you look up really high on the building, stand across the street and look up, it's really cool because there's a coat of arms, and above that is the head of Beethoven wearing a laurel crown with two angels on either side, one with a harp and one with a violin. Because it was a society of composers.
Why is that?
Yeah. So, but it's really cool because it's one of
So they
those
put
things that
Beethoven there as like
it's
an
up high in the
angelic
building, so
man.
you're not going to notice it unless you need to, to look for it. But that's what is so great about Paris and just walking down the streets. Like when you do go to Paris, just make sure. And I do this when I do planning for people. Just, I always say plan one big thing during the morning, but then give yourself, depending on where it is, walk and give yourself like an hour to get there. If it says it's going to take you 15 minutes, give yourself an hour. And then that way just stop and just really look around and look up at the buildings, because sometimes you find something really cool that you're never going to notice if you're in a hurry or you're just looking at eye level. Oh, yeah. I mean, I walk down the
I'm still finding things 10 years later that I never noticed on many streets.
Has that always been there? Yeah, it's really cool. But then we go down the street, and there is
so many details.
Street that most people might have heard of, the Rue Notre Dame de Lorette. It is named for the church that is at the end of the street. And at number 58, from 1844 to 1857, that is right, Eugène Delacroix lived there before he moved over to Saint-Germain. The facade has been updated, but the studio is still there. It is now divided into apartments, but I would just die. I mean, I'm a left banker, but if I got to live in the building that used to be and live in his former studio, that would be pretty amazing. I know. Yeah, that could too. And I love
that could turn you into a right banker.
Excuse me. But I mean, I always wonder, like, do these people actually know? Like, I just kind of want to go there, knock on the door, and just be like, "Excuse me, I need to see inside here real quick." And also, do you know where you live? Yeah, right next door to him at number 56,
Yeah, do you
another artist,
understand how
Paul
awesome
Gauguin,
this
lived
is?
there. He lived there in 1848. And at number 54, what we just talked about in the episode we did about Ile de la Cité, there is, when we talked about Eloise and Abelard, on number 54, up on the building, there's a relief that has the images of Eloise and Abelard. Yeah, it's very cute. There's also at number 49, another
So
artist,
sweet.
Pissarro, lived there. The balcony on it it's held up by a pelican, like a sculpture of a pelican, which is kind of random. It was built in 1847, and right there is
Oh my God.
also it comes up to the back of this square. The square in the garden was added on, and this is in basically comes up to the back of what is the Place Saint Georges. So this whole area, it's the ninth, but this little area right there is called Saint Georges. At number 27, Place Saint Georges, and it's this beautiful, there's a statue in the middle, which we'll tell you about. But at number 27 is where in 1832, Alex Dosnay had a neoclassical hotel built and had his daughter, Elisa, live there. In 1840, she married Adolphe Thiers, who was ended up going on to be a president of France. He was a historian, a journalist, and a politician during the July monarchy. His wife was the oldest daughter, and his wife. So his wife's mother. This gets confusing. His wife's mother, he had an affair with, and he was her mother's lover, and then they broke it
What?
off. But to keep him close, the mother decided to marry him off to her daughter. It's very early in the morning, where it's like 4 a.m. recording this, so I really had to think about
What?
that. Isn't that weird? But it's also kind of like that's something
That is
men
so
do. So it's
like
kind of like
horrible though.
good for her. But yeah, her father died in 1849. And so Adolf and his wife
Wow.
inherited the building. The building was destroyed in the Commune of 1871, but it was rebuilt between 1873 to 1875 from the original plans. Thiers went on to be the president of the French Republic after Napoleon III for just a year, and he died in 1877. His funeral was at the Église Notre-Dame de Lorette, which was just down the street. 1 million people stood on the streets of Paris, and 20,000 people followed his cortege to the Père Lachaise. He was very loved. His wife left. They had this huge collection of
Guess
art
he
in
was very
Objet
much
d'Art.
loved.
They left most of it to the Louvre, and you could go, when you go to the Louvre and you go into the Richelieu wing and you go to the apartments of Napoleon III, which he never lived in. We'll do that another time. But if there's little small rooms before you get to the big grandeur of the red velvet and gold. And those rooms are filled with a bunch of the small objets d'art that belong to Adolf. Yeah, and it'll say his name on the wall. You'll see, like, the
That's
Collection
cool. I have to go
Adolphe
there.
Thiers. The house was given to the Institut de France. It is now the library that you speak of. This very, very cool library that you have to get permission to go to, but it is also, because you're the one who actually told me about it, it is where Dan Brown did most of his research for the Da Vinci Code. I didn't, because it has really those libraries always have really
Did you ever
weird
get permission? Did you
times, and
go?
so it's like afternoons, like 2 days a week, and so I need to do it when I'm there, and I have when I'm living there full time soon, when I have more time, because unfortunately you have to do it, and then it's you have to schedule it in advance, and then if I have a tour, then so but I can't wait to go, so Giuseppe and I could go. Can't wait. But Place Saint Georges, which is where we are
Yeah,
right
you
in the
gotta
middle
go.
of at this point, the fountain in the center of the street was created for the horses that could stop and drink some water. It was the current monument is dedicated to Gavras, and it was by Denis Prouche. He also, there was also medallions on it that were dedicated to some of the people from the Comédie Française. But Gavarin was an artist. He was a watercolor and a lithographer. He lived near here from 1837 to 1846, so that's why he gets this little monument there. The base of it has bas reliefs of a carnival figures. So there's three bronze figures on there, and they're kind of those there's kind of like when it comes to carnivals and clowns, it's like borderline creepy. But it's just a really, really cool fountain, just sitting there in the middle of the street. That's traffic goes around it, traffic furniture as they call it in the Tour de France. But it's a really, really cool one. But there's a beautiful building here in this. It's number 28. It was the Hotel de la Marquise de Piva. She was a Russian courtesan, and we love the courtesans. Here she began her life as a prostitute near the church, because that's the when we've talked before about the different levels of like prostitutes. There's the grisettes, the lorettes. The lorettes, the name comes because of that area around the church, the Notre Dame de Lorette. And this was a big area where they had the seamstresses and the women that would wash the clothes, and so a lot of those women became prostitutes for extra money. So they were the lorettes. So she started among there. This building, it was built in 1840 by Renard in a Gothic revival, neo-Renaissance style. She moved here in 1851 and was given to her by Albino Francisco de Arujo de Pavia, who she married. She lived there for 1 year. There's statues on the top of it of abundance and temperance. In 1852, her next wealthy catch built her an even grander palace on the Champs-Elysees that is now the Travelers Club, and it is one of those addresses that if you could get in to go look around, it is amazing. Yeah, it's this Travelers Club. It's like a men's club.
What, you have to know
I'm surprised
somebody?
you actually haven't done any photos in there. No, I don't think so. I think it's called the
It's not
Travelers
the
Club.
automobile club?
It's on the Champs-Elysees, maybe. Maybe it is.
Because there's the automobile club
Yeah,
on Place de Concorde. I've shown a lot of events there.
No,
And it's still a men's
up
only
higher
club.
on the
Boo!
Champs-Elysees. I think we'll have to. I'll look it up. But it's really,
Okay.
so she just lived there for a year and then she was out of there. The also right there in the corner is the Théâtre de Saint-Georges. In 1829 it was built, and it is one of the older theaters. It's actually still standing, that wasn't destroyed. And on the street right off of that, there's this little tiny street that runs behind it that was basically kind of an alleyway that turned into a street. It's really, really sweet. The Rue La Ferrière. It was once just a passage that was created by the homeowners, and then the city was like, you can't go and create your own street. And so they ended up finally having this long battle, and they finally incorporated the street. The poet Stéphane Mallarmé lived there. He was born in 1842. He lived there. He was also very close to the Manets, and was the one that kind of served as Julie Manet, the daughter of Berthe Morisot, kind of as her uncle after she lost her parents. Another street right around the corner from there is the Rue Henri Monnier, that is named after the cartoonist and playwright. At number 15, another woman we talked about, Eva Gonzalez, lived where she married Henri Giraud. And then they ended up moving down to number 2. Rue Clausel, which is another little street that's right off of the side. It was named after a journalist. And the corner at number 24, there above a cafe, is where Pierre Tanguy had lived for a short period of time, which we'll talk about him in a second. He's another one of my favorites. But also right there lived Henri-François Resnier and his wife Anne-Louise. His hunky son was Louis-Antoine Resnier, who was a cousin of Delacroix. And Delacroix has a painting that he did of him, and that is why I call him the hunky Louis. He's really, really handsome. They were all artists. His father had some paintings in the Louvre, and I just was recently trying to find them. The Louvre owns like 12 of his paintings, but none of them are on display, which is a big bummer. At number 17, Guy de Maupassant lived. And then at number 14 is where Pierre Tanguy, who was a color crusher, he was called. He lived there. He had a shop there from 1868 to his death in 1872. He was amazing. There is a painting. How I found out about him years ago is because Van Gogh did a painting of him, and I love this painting, and it's in the Rodin Museum because Rodin owned it. And one time I was like, who is that? And of course, I did my deep diving and, down a rabbit hole. But he was this. I just watched this French movie called Cézanne et Moi the other day, and Tanguy was in it, which I was really excited. He was a color crusher, and so basically he made paint, he made colors, and and as you could tell, this whole area, we had Delacroix, Pissarro, Gauguin, all of these artists, and there's more that lived in this area, and so this was a heavy concentrated area for artists. And so Tanguy had a lot of clients. His clients included all of those that I just mentioned, also Monet and Renoir, Toulouse-Lautrec, Signac, also Dr. Gachet. Dr. Gachet was the doctor of Van Gogh, who also was an artist who I just, in the Orsay, there's a collection of his paintings that he owned, which we should do a whole episode about him because it's fascinating. But Pierre Tanguy, they loved this man. They just thought he was most wonderful. They would say his colors aren't the best, but they loved him so much that they always went to him. He sometimes, when the artist couldn't afford, because all of those guys, they were never, Van Gogh was not Van Gogh. All of these guys were not what we think of them today. Van Gogh sold one painting in while he was alive. And so sometimes they didn't have money to buy the paint. So they would end up giving him paintings. So people would go there because they were like, was basically like walking into an art gallery to go visit it. Paint Crusher, isn't that cool? At That's number really cool. 9, I love the name Paint Crusher. Moved over across the street. He also had that as a later location, or the earlier location for his store. When he died, kind of just suddenly, his wife and daughter, they didn't have a lot of money, and so all the artists got together and raised a bunch of money to and sold paintings that would help them. But there's this really cool painting, I love it, that's in the Rodin Museum of him, done by Van Gogh. And in the background, it's all of these other, and I love when it's a painting inside a painting. It has all of these paintings of Japanese woodblock prints, because the woodblock prints, the Japanese, because they were so colorful, everybody kind of knows the one of the very famous big wave, the big blue wave. And so in the background is all of these different Japanese woodblock prints, because that was such a huge influence to the Impressionists. Yeah, I love that. I always love visiting that. And when I take people in there,
that's cool. I never noticed that one.
Telling them the story. But also on that street, and number 7 is a Renaissance style mansion that was built in 1897 for Francois Châtelet. He was a historian and a philosopher. Number 2, Prosper Mérillant was an artist. He died there at 36, as most of them are. And then around the corner, you go the Rue des Matières, which is another very famous street because there was a book written about it being the only street in Paris. At number 49, Géricault is where he lived. He had a studio there. He also had an apartment down the street. But this is where he died, when he and his friend Ari Scheffer came over and painted him. It is just above on the street. There's a plaque dedicated to him. He had lived down the street at number 23. But Géricault was famous for his painting, The Raft and the Medusa. But he died, it was 36 years old. He died, they say, because he fell off a horse and he had injuries that kind of just never went away. But most likely it was syphilis. Yeah, exactly. But also number 9,
that was a nice way of saying he has syphilis.
Had lived there. And number 12 is where one of the original versions of Le Chat Noir was. There's quite a few. It moved around Montparnasse or Montmartre quite a few times. At number 19, now we have a female artist, Mary Cassatt, lived there. Number 13 is where Degas lived. Number 25 is where we talked about her probably over a year ago, Bertwil, who was this amazing woman that was one of the very first women to ever actually own a gallery. In 1901, this is where she had her gallery, where she did the exhibit of Modigliani, his one and only exhibit, and everybody was shocked because there was these naked women with how shall we call it? Not very trimmed up images of these women, very naked women that he had painted, and they were completely freaked out and called the cops, and they were going to shut it all down. But then he shortly died after that. Also on this street is where the same building at number 25 is where Theo and Vincent van Gogh lived from February 1886 to April of that same year before they moved to the Rue Lepic. Also on this street is where our dear friend of ours used to have a atelier in the Cité de Malesherbes, and it's no longer there. But number 3 is where a more contemporary person was born, Johnny Holiday. Yeah. So that is
Is
where
that
I
where
said
they
that
take
to her.
pictures of him on
Johnny
the outside
Holiday
of the building?
was born across the street, and she was like, "Oh yes, people come all the time." Yeah, but down in this area, there's also and when you go over
Oh
to the
yes.
Avenue Fauché, which is a private street, which I still am waiting for the day for the gate to open so I could go sneaking in there, because on this little passageway you had Jean Renoir had lived there, who was the son of Renoir, Alexandre Dumas, Chassereau, Gustave Moreau, Toulouse-Lautrec, Diego Reinhardt, like all of these very incredibly famous people have lived down this little street. It's a private street. I've never walked by and seen the gate open. It's this beautiful little lovely street. Also on that at number 34, just at the street outside of it, is where Chassereau lived. Theodore Chassereau was a kind of a student of Ingres, and then he ended up being a student of Delacroix. And when you go to the Louvre, you could see there's 2 rooms. There's the room of his paintings, which are very neoclassical. Then you go to the next room that's Delacroix, very large room. One side of the room is Delacroix, the other side is Chassereau, and you definitely see more of how he changed his influence with Delacroix's more Oriental period. At number 4, Degas lived there. Degas lived a lot of places, as you could tell. And at number 5 was the very last studio of Toulouse-Lautrec, which is Yep, Toulouse lived all around there. There's is one street that
Toulouse
there
lived
is
there?
a street art painting of him on the wall. He had quite a few studios and apartments around that area and up into Montmartre, but a lot of those buildings are gone, sadly. Yeah, but when you go up to the very top and you're heading towards
That is
Pigalle, this is
sad.
in the Place Pigalle, so you're on the south side of Pigalle. At number 7 lived a woman, and we actually, I think, talked about her when we did some of the stuff about the Orsay. There was a woman that lived there. Her name was Apolline Sabatier. She was a model for Auguste Classenguer. He did this sculpture of her, and I think we did talk about this because it's in the Orsay. It is called A Woman Stung by a Serpent, and it was hugely controversial at the time, and I love to show people this when I take people to the Orsay, because it was controversial because they said it was a life cast. They are saying that because this was something Rodin was accused of as well, that they would actually literally cast something on a person's body to make the sculpture. And it was just hugely controversial because instead of like basically interpreting it, they're making it literally from their body, kind of like how a death mask is made. And the reason they thought this was because on the back of her thighs, on her upper thighs, was cellulite.
Yeah.
I know, but you see it. You see this at the
Oh, and who
Orsay, and you can walk
incorporates
behind it. And
cellulite?
every time you go there, once it gets busy and there's guides in there, the guides always stop there. I mean, I take people there, but what I really love is not just this piece because it has such a cool story, but because of who the woman was herself. She was this like basically a muse. She was a muse for Baudelaire. He dedicated poems in the Flowers of Evil to her. She held these salons and dinners. She was a muse for artists and authors. She once lived at the Hotel Lausanne, which is on the Ile Saint Louis, which is where she first met Baudelaire. Every Sunday when she held her salon, it was the place to be. Everybody from Alexandre Dumas to Alfred de Musset, who was a lover of Georges Sand, Flaubert, Gautier, all of these people came there. But what I really think is kind of cool about this was in 1860, she was the lover of Sir Richard Wallace for 10 years. And you might know his name because of the fountains, the Wallace fountains. They were lovers, and at that same time,
Oh, yeah.
that is when during that period of time is when he decided to create the Wallace fountains, which was 150 years ago. This September was when the first one was unveiled, and there's going to be a huge celebration in the city of Paris this September for it. On the Champs-Elysees, they're going to do a whole thing. But so he was inspired to do these fountains, and then but he saw this one statue monument in the Louvre that was done it was the three caryatides holding up this, what at the time was this bronze urn that was going to have the heart of Henry II in it, and then eventually the heart of Catherine de Medici, which I don't think she had one, but he was inspired by that. He worked with a sculptor to do the Wallace fountains, which we should do a whole episode about. But I am now convinced, even though I have searched for hours and hours, and I even picked up this little book in Paris about the Wallace fountains, that I'm wondering if that's her face. And I've looked at it closely compared to other statues, and I'm wondering if she was the model for the fountains. Somebody must know. So maybe this year, maybe when they have later on in
find out. Somebody must know.
Celebration, maybe some more of it will come out. But it's really cool. You could see that her beautiful this, and it's so funny because it's basically this statue of her that's in the Orsay. She is kind of like, reeling in like delight, like her body is all, twisted, and then it's this very, very tiny snake that's wrapped around her wrist like a bracelet that I have of a snake like that. And so it's really kind of, and that was also part of the controversy because it's like, no, it looks like she's in the throes of passion. And then they said, this looks like, you cheated and you did this off her body, do it again. So he made another one that was very much like that, but without the cellulite. And that one is now in the Orsay. I know. Well, back then it was just,
They made such a big
the
deal
naked
about
body,
cellulite.
like when we've talked about Manet and Olympia with Victorine, just, it was okay for it to be a naked body if she was called, an allegory, or if she was, Psyche. But as soon as it looks like she's a normal everyday woman, then it was this huge issue. Yeah. So dumb. But it's pretty cool that it's, and that's, I get that a lot when I'm, especially when I take people into, the Louvre, when you see these statues, like you see Venus de Milo and you see Winged Victory, the most beautiful thing. And, you see this is in Venus, and, Venus is supposed to be the version of the ideal beauty. But now, when people, like, especially women, they're always just like, yeah, I mean, she has like a little bit of a tummy. She's got more curves to her. And now that isn't, now that's not what people think. Or, we laugh, and I sometimes say, yeah, I mean, now it's like, would she look more like a Kardashian if that's what they think is the ideal beauty? But, they all have like, they're more normal. So, and that was a depiction of, the ideal woman was to be a little curvier and to have a little bit more, to her, but not so over exaggerated like a Kardashian, I guess. Yeah, it was. That's why they were, that's why you were
they had
pale.
money
That's
to
why
eat.
it wasn't,
very important.
If you were tan. Back then, that was considered like, oh, well, obviously, you are a worker, and you're out, because if you had this, opalescent skin that was very pale, it means that you were obviously very rich because you didn't have to be outside.
I would have been very rich and hot back then. I'm a pale, chubby one. Exactly. It's perfect. I'm just born in the wrong age.
Yeah.
Giuseppe appreciates it. Well, don't forget to take this episode with you guys on the go and listen while you're roaming around St. George. And don't forget to head over to ClaudineHemingway.com and tune in next week.
Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's Bleu, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.